Good evening, Sector 001. I'm TJ Yesnak, your host for the Jupiter Station podcast. And tonight's guest is one of Trek's more hidden guests. She has starred in the original series more than once. Is definitely a part of Star Trek history. I didn't know that until literally last week. So I'm very honored to have scheduled the opportunity to speak with her. Now, let me welcome, without further ado, our guest, Sandy Gimpel.
Hi, how are you?
Sandy?
Thank you for having me.
Oh, definitely. You probably heard me in my intro. I was like last week years old when I found out that the Telosians were in fact not male characters.
I know. A lot of people thought that.
And through the miracle of, I'm sure, camera angling and some pretty sharp direction, they made you guys look a whole lot taller than you were.
There were lots of phony rocks to stand on. So
That's always helpful.
Yep.
So for those who aren't as familiar with you as I guess I am now, can you give us a little bit of your background?
Oh my gosh. Well, I was a dancer, and that's how I got in the business. I actually auditioned for a movie called The Pleasure of His Company with Fred Astaire and Debbie Reynolds, and they picked me as one of the dancers and got into the entertainment industry that way, and went on to dance with Elvis Presley in 15 movies that he did. And then when he did Change of Habit and stopped, doing movies, dancers were in a thing called Screen Extras Guild, and Background was also in that organization. And so I thought, well, I'll do some background work. Why not? And they called me in to stand in when they light the lights and set the cameras for Bill Mummy on Lost in Space. And they started asking me all these questions and stuff like that. And I was like, they only need to know my height and weight. Why? What do they want? And one of the guys turned around, who was Paul Stater, and he was our stunt coordinator. And he said, "Do you want to do stunts?" And I went, "What's a stunt?" And he said, "Well, your timing is good, your coordination. If you come to the gym 3 days a week, we'll let you do the show, and you can stunt double bill and stand in for him." And I went, "Perfect. I like that. Sounds like fun to me." And from there, I was doing that show, and they decided they were going to do The Cage, which was the very first pilot of Star Trek. And they called over to Paul and said, "Do you have anybody that can wear this kind of makeup without breaking out?" Because they would, glue it to your face, and a lot of people couldn't handle it. They would break out. And he said, "Oh yeah, we've got Sandy. She does a lot of our monsters, and she's used to that. So we don't need her next week. So you can have her." So that's how I got Star Trek.
Wow. And looking further, you did a whole ton of science fiction. You did like you said, Lost in Space. You did Star Trek. You did Battlestar Galactica, like the original Battlestar Galactica. So you really have your chops in a lot of science fiction and stunts.
Yeah, I did. I got very blessed because they started realizing, the business wasn't that huge in that, then in the 60s and 70s. And so they found out that I could wear costumes and not, be claustrophobic and not, break out and all of that. So I ended up doing a lot of sci-fi stuff. I did the Planet of the Apes TV series, got to play a chimpanzee and double one of the girls on the show that was blind. Supposedly she was a blind ape, and she finds out she's in love with a human, and she panics and starts crying, runs across the cliffs and falls into the ocean, and then they have to save her. And so that whole scene was me doing that. But yeah, I did that. And then I did Evil Dead 2, which was really funny because the girl I was doubling was very tall. She was like 5'6", 5'7", and I'm like 5 feet, 5'1" maybe. And they wanted
Wow.
me. Well, they wanted me because they had to pull her through the forest, and they wanted somebody smaller. So the stunt coordinator wanted somebody smaller so that he could pull her, have the ATC far enough away, be out of camera, and pull her through the trees without her swinging out too wide, to hit the trees and stuff. So I got to double her on that whole show and do that. But it was really funny because they would say to me, now just sit in the chair and don't stand up when Sam Raimi comes over to direct. Just don't stand up till you have to work. And I'm like, okay, fine. Because they were kind of, I'm so much shorter than she was. But it worked out. It worked out great. And actually, Sam and I became pretty good friends.
That is awesome. Never know when knowledge of physics might come in handy, right?
You never know.
So that actually answered one of the questions that I had was, how did you handle the salt vampire? Because there's word that you were actually in the salt vampire costume.
Oh, that was me. All right. Basically what they did was they sent me in before, like a week before, and they took a plaster cast of my face. And then they made the mask to fit me, and they took all my measurements and made the costume to fit me. So then they put the costume on me and put the face, the headgear on and everything, and then they sewed it all together. Well, the only problem with it was the eyes had little slits, and you couldn't see anything. You had no peripheral vision. You couldn't see the ground. Basically, I could see straight ahead, and that was it. So when it came to the scene where I'm supposed to be sucking the salt out of Shatner's face, I couldn't see because the suckers on the fingers were beyond my fingers. My fingers stopped, and then the suckers came out. So I would hit him in the face, and it was very embarrassing. And I was embarrassed. He thought it was funny at the time. So anyway, it ended up. Gene Roddenberry was on the set. He was always on the set, and I said, "Guys, you just got to do me a favor and take the hood off, take the whole helm, the whole face off. Let me figure out where I am. Let me." Take my spot where I have my hands on him. Let me back up. Let me count my steps to him so I don't miss him. So they agreed to that. And they, finally, we rehearsed it without the whole top on. And then they sewed it all back together. And I went to my starting position, and it worked out perfect. So that was, the way we did it. Now,
And history, as they say, was made.
Sorry.
All right. Speaking of costumes, for the Telosians especially, was that a heavy makeup or was it lightweight? It was just cumbersome and sticky.
That was pieces. A lot of it was pieces. What they did is they put the ball cap on you, and then they put the Telosian head on you, and in the head had veins that you could see, and they had them painted like a blue color. And then they had a tube running down your arm to a ball in your hand, and you would push the air ball, and it would make the veins move. So all of that was, put on
Oh,
you,
that is so
to
cool.
your face, and then all of the pieces were glued to your face. And it was quite a job. It took 3.5 hours to get that all on us.
Kind of like Michael Dorn when he has to put on his makeup for Worf. It's a production, no pun intended.
No, a lot of that stuff that, a lot of the makeup like that, it takes 3.5 hours. It takes a good hour to get it off too, because it's, they have to be very careful taking it off. They can't just pull it off. It doesn't work that way. They've got to, use acetone and Q-tips and stuff to get it off, especially in those days.
Yeah, because it was almost literally super glue.
Oh yeah. Yeah. In fact, when I did Planet of the Apes, and usually, if it's hot or you're sweating, the stuff starts peeling off, and they've got to, reattach it and whatever. Well, this worked totally opposite, because when I did the high fall off of the cliff, I went into boxes. And we use airbags today, but we used boxes then. And then they put me out into the ocean, and then they saved me. So it looked like I fell off the cliff into the ocean. Well, we went to take the makeup off, and the salt water adhered all of these pieces to my face, and they couldn't get it off. And I mean, I was sitting, literally remember sitting in the chair with my hands grasping the chair as they took a Q-tip and acetone underneath this thing trying to get it off. And the makeup artist asking me, "Do you want to? Should we stop? Should we wait for a while?" And I go, "Just no, just get it off." I mean, it was crazy. That was the only time I had that experience, though, with that.
Wow, that's the things you never know.
That's true.
Um, Now it also says you're a second unit director. Is that the second unit covers stunts and secondary things?
Yes, it's the action unit of a show. If if a television show doesn't have enough time, to shoot everything, because they was like 7 days for an hour show, they'll have a second unit director, and they will shoot all of the action stuff. And sometimes, like when I did Mrs. Columbo, Kate Columbo, they would send me the actors and say, "We need this shot done," and so I would just go ahead and do that too. But I was so very blessed because I was the first stunt woman ever to get her director's card. So, and I did that on Mrs. Columbo with Kate Mulgrew.
Oh, nice. And I think it's very fitting that today is International Women's Day, and we're learning about this.
I know, isn't that cool?
It was completely by chance that I had scheduled this on the same day.
Perfect timing.
Let me think here. So, as far as Star Trek, did you have prior knowledge of it? Or, I mean, obviously you were in on the ground floor being the background performer, but have you followed it since? Or is it just one of those things that you follow occasionally?
It's interesting. When we did it, I had no idea. And then, of course, the network didn't buy it. So it just kind of disappeared out of my brain. And then a year so later, when they called, they said, "We have another monster. Do you want to come back and, do this?" And I went, "Sure, why not?" And it's interesting because the way I work as a stunt person, you go in and you work, a week, a few days, a day, and you just go on to the next show. And you don't kind of think about what you've done that has become iconic. And I really never thought much about it until Richard Arnold, who was Gene Roddenberry's assistant, called me and said, "Can you sign some trading cards for me?" And I'm thinking, who is this person? What does he want me to do? And he goes, "No, I'll pay you." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I called my agent and said, "Look, will you do me a favor and deal with him? Because I have no idea what he's talking about." So she did. She made the deal with him for me to sign the cards and get paid half front, half up front and half at the end. And while that was happening, he and I started talking, and he said, "Do you want to do a Star Trek convention?" And he said, "It's the 50th anniversary of Star Trek." And I went, "They have conventions?" I just paid no attention. And he said, "Oh my gosh, yes, for sure." And I said, "Yeah, it sounds like fun." He said, You just come, you'll sign autographs. A lot of the pictures, you'll just order your whatever pictures you want that Creations, who puts the event on, want you to sign, and you'll get them from them." And I went, "Okay, sounds easy." So, and they paid for everything, and I went, okay. So I went to Vegas for the 50th anniversary and was blown away. I mean, totally blown away. I mean, people were asking me questions, and I was asking them questions because they were dressed in full costume. I mean, total. I mean, I can't believe how most of these things they made themselves, and they did the makeup themselves, and they were incredible. And I come to find out by asking, people come to my table and talking to me and asking for my autograph. They were doctors, they were lawyers, they were astronauts, they were, I mean, incredibly brilliant people. And everything they said was, because I would say, well, how did you get into doing that? And they go, because of Star Trek, because of the show itself. When I was 11 years old when I was watching the beginning shows, and that inspired me to go into the fields that I went into, like being a doctor because of McCoy, and being a lawyer and being an astronaut. And it was because of the show. And so I was really blown away by that. And then, I started, really following the shows and watching them. And now I do a lot of conventions, Star Trek conventions and podcasts and stuff, and I enjoy it. I love it. I love talking, and getting feedback from the people and the questions that they have.
And to be quite honest, I'm a member of probably one of the bigger Star Trek fan clubs, and somehow I've found myself becoming director of recruiting for the entire organization. It's just mind blowing how big Star Trek is. And,
Yeah.
it's an international organization that I'm working for purely voluntarily. And, you get to recruit people who have the same crazy, I would almost say obsession. And, you get to go see the conventions. I went to one locally here back in July, and I went wearing my blue medical Star Trek Picard uniform. And
Uh-huh.
I'm talking with oh boy, of all times for me to forget names.
That's
Terry Farrell. Terry Farrell I was talking with. And she stops, like she introduced herself, said, "Hi, how are you?" She shakes my hand and she stops dead in her tracks and looks at my shoulder and says, "Oh my God, you have it's a science uniform. And look, there's little deltas on it." And she got so excited about just the tiniest little detail on my uniform. And
absolutely.
you talk to these people, and I remember Terry when I was 16, and I'm 47 now, and I'm talking to her. I'm like, huh? What? Uh-huh. And I have to remember, probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks I have in this format is that when I'm talking to my guests, that I'm really very mechanical, as my brother told me. And I enjoy this. I should be able to share this with the people I'm interviewing. And I forget sometimes that the only difference between a Star Trek celebrity and me is just basically what we do for work. They get to travel the cosmos and shoot and explore strange new worlds, and I get to watch them. That's the cool part.
No, it's cool.
And
That's like I said.
I have to say your episodes are definitely two of my favorites, especially when they brought the cage back as the menagerie.
Yes, yeah. No, I got.
Um,
I enjoy talking to you. To the fans as much as they enjoy talking to me.
and if you're planning any trips to Connecticut for Terrificon, I'm sure I could put in a good word with the organizer.
To which one?
Terrificon. They hosted at Mohegan Sun in Uncasville, Connecticut.
Oh my gosh! And when is that?
This year's is August 16th to the 18th.
Oh, I'd love to go. Are you kidding me? I mean,
Well,
I would appreciate you putting a. That's it's interesting. There's a gentleman that I know that actually put a word in for me to go to with James Cowley in New York. And I never say this right. Tekaronda.
Ticonderoga, yes.
Sorry, that's it.
You're talking about the enterprise model.
Yes, and he actually talked to him last week, and told him about me, and James said, "I know who she is. I would love to have her call me right now." And so I went and I talked to him on the phone, and they booked me to go in July um, there. So I was very excited. It was all because of the gentleman that I was talking to.
That is that's one of those amazing Star Trek things that you have to see to believe. Like just how close knit everybody is in such a large community.
Yeah, there and everybody's, I don't think I've met anybody that's not incredibly nice and forthward, coming forth to want to help you and do things for you. It's just amazing to me. Wish the world
And
was like that.
and like those people that have told you that they got their start doing what they're doing by watching Star Trek. I've told a few guests the same thing pretty much resonates with me. I started watching it when I was in elementary school with my dad. And Star Trek got me through middle school. Like I was able to kind of like pull myself out of my head and kind of imagine where I was, and it kind of, I want to say, it dulled the pain of teenageness. Um, I
Love it.
went into, of all things, law enforcement.
Wow.
That kind of resonated with like Wharf and stuff and like red shirts. And then I'm a firefighter and an EMT, so I definitely find myself drawing on like Dr. McCoy and the EMH from Voyager.
Oh, sure.
Um, I have a meme that I made, and it says, "What I thought I was going to be when I grow up," and it shows Captain Kirk. And then the other picture says, "What I really turned out to be," and it's the EMH. So
I
it's
love
that dull, sarcastic hologram version of Dr. McCoy.
it. No, I love it. He was Roddenberry was so beyond his times with what he had and what he made. It's incredible when you think about it, because you take a look at the shows that I did from the beginning, and he had iPads, and he had cell phones, and he had, I mean, all these things that we take for granted today that nobody ever even heard of in those days.
I mean,
And
look at what we're doing. You and I are 3,000 miles apart, and we're talking like we're in the next room.
exactly.
That was Star Trek.
Yes, absolutely was. I mean, he was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant.
And I got to say, his son Eugene Jr. is a very lucky man to have had a dad like that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I absolutely agree with you. And I know, between doing Lost in Space and doing Star Trek, there was such a difference, because Lost in Space was more, more towards kids, and Star Trek was more towards adults. And I'd been on a set, on Lost in Space, where the director directed, and if the producer came in, he'd come in, for a few minutes and leave, or if he decided he wanted to do something, one of the directors go sit down and he'd go direct. But with Gene Roddenberry, he never left the set. I mean, he was on the set all the time, hands on, and that's, you know, um, the way he worked. And later in life, later on, he really wanted the control that the networks won't let you have, and that's kind of a shame as far as I can see. But there's nothing you can do about it. The network like to have their say in a lot of stuff, and that's why the first show didn't get sold, because the network didn't like it. And whoever heard of a woman being the co-captain, and the show was so diversified, nobody did shows like that. So it was
And
beyond
and
way.
nowadays we look at that stuff and we take it for granted, really.
Absolutely do. Absolutely. It's just part of the way we are, the way we shoot and have filmed, and thank goodness.
And just the variety of things that Gene Roddenberry did before he was Star Trek. I mean, and you can't say it any other way. It's like Gene Roddenberry is Star Trek, because that was
Yeah.
from inside his mind. And he was an airline pilot. He was a police officer. Things you would never in a million years expect. Uh, Somebody who basically started the Star Trek phenomenon from the ground up, and he had
Oh yeah.
real life, everyday, regular jobs.
Yep. Yep.
Well, Sandy, I appreciate you talking with us tonight. It was a pleasure.
Oh,
Um, Typically, I film and then I'll do my post production. So this actually won't hit YouTube until probably midnight Sunday, and then it'll distribute out from there to the podcast areas like Amazon Music and things like that.
can I give a plug for my book?
Absolutely, go right ahead.
Um, I have a book out that's really about my life and how I started in the business, and all about Star Trek and Lost in Space and all the other movies that I've done. And there's some backstage stories about them. And you can find it on sandragimpel.com, or you can go to Amazon and go to Stunt Lady and it'll come up also. But if you want it signed, if you want me to sign the book, just go to my website and order it, and I'll sign it and send it out to you. And it's a fun book. It's an easy read, and it reads like I talk. I mean, I did it myself. I did have an editor correct the spelling and grammar because I'm not really good at spelling and stuff like that. But other than that, he didn't change anything. And it's full of tons of pictures from all the sets and all the people I doubled and people I know. So it's a fun book. It's a fun read.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sandy. I'm also going to link that on our webpage, which is www.jupiterstation.com. So,
Perfect.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
jupiterstationpodcast.com. But
Um,
thanks for visiting with us tonight. It was really an honor, Sandy, and we'll talk to you later.
oh, thank you. It's an honor for having me.
No problem. Have a great night.
You too. Bye, guys.